I'm going to apologise because this is really a completely English presentation, but I'm hoping that it will provide a really nice foil for Heather's talk that's coming after, and also some similarities and differences that we might find with dance in Australia. In 1804, Sophia Baker, who was the daughter of an MP in Hertfordshire, noted in her diary, "Mama and I called on Mrs. Franks, played mad pranks all the way. Di came in the evening and we danced." Any perusal of Sophia's diaries shows the frequency with which dance was mentioned, indicating the important role it played in genteel social and cultural life in England around the turn of the 19th century. As an activity that cultivated a poised deportment, social dance functioned as an emblem for articulating status and wealth in a stratified class system. Both town and country houses were significant venues for hosting dance, providing the foundation upon which narratives of patronage and display took place. The breadth of domestic dance ranged from private and spontaneous dancing for family amusement through to highly planned celebrations in honour of important events. Country house owners commemorated christenings, weddings, and birthdays by hosting a range of festivities that often included dance, with such events frequently incorporating hospitality towards servants and local tenantry. In London, balls held at exclusive addresses catered for hundreds of guests in opulent surroundings. Sometimes the numbers were so large that dancing was precluded altogether. Given the close cohabitation between dance and domestic space, dance was an important, if temporary, feature in the internal lives of houses. Due to its ephemeral nature, the history of social dance is often fragmentary, with precise information about choreography and music lacking, and this is something that Graham pointed out earlier in terms of the specificity of information that we get. Although large balls were reported in the press, these accounts need to be filtered through a political, social, and class-oriented lens. Personal descriptions of domestic dance, which appear in archival letters, diaries, and published memoirs, lend nuance to this picture. They provide invaluable insights into the individuality, humour, and vagaries with which dance took place in the home. At Dunham Massey, in 1825, a servants' dance was held to celebrate the wedding of Lady Jane Grey, where her father, who was an earl, danced with the maids, and his footman dressed as an old woman. Writing from Chichester in 1830, Isabella Howard, the Countess of Suffolk, described an unenthusiastic response to a solicitation to dance. Mr. Callan arrived from Arundel accompanied, do you understand my small pun, by one big and three little fiddles. The piano was moved out on the lawn and we were desired to dance. As soon as I had persuaded one couple to stand up, the next sat down, and so on, till at last, in despair, Harry begged for a gallop. After the usual solicitations, "Can you gallop?" "Oh, I'm sure you can." 6 unfortunate people were selected, and off we set, to a sort of jig. But in spite of our utmost exertions, it was like dancing on soap. We only put ourselves out of breath and spoiled our shoes. So, to my great satisfaction, this melancholy mirth was soon given up. Moments like these are important precisely for the awkwardness and lack of cohesion they show, which can be placed against more polished public accounts. While domestic dance principally involved social dance forms, it is important to note the performance of theatrical dance in the home. Although much work still needs to be done to establish the extent and manner in which ballet and stage dance were produced in the domestic environment, it is clear that it took place. Several scholars have shown how dance infiltrated country house theatricals, both as part of an evening's amusement where you would have a ball that followed a series of plays, and in the context of the drama itself. At Burton Constable, which Janice mentioned earlier, in 1843, a performance of the comedy Simpson and Co. closed with a quadrille danced by the characters, showing how the genres of social dance and theatre were not mutually exclusive. The importation of dance from London theatres into the home represents a particular blurring of boundaries. In 1770, Gertrude and Louisa Harris staged a performance of the pastoral Daphnis and Amaryllis at their home in Salisbury. converting the chapel room into a theatre. Their mother reported the performance was infinitely better than it was performed at Drury Lane, additionally noting that the dance and chorus was all their own composing. I should point out that their father, James Harris, wrote the libretto for the pastoral. Lady Barbara Ashley Cooper, the young daughter of the 5th Earl of Shaftesbury, invited guests to an entertainment at her London home in 1799, which included a performance of the ballet Little Peggy's Love. Under the guidance of Madame Hilligsberg, a principal dancer at the King's Theatre who oversaw the coaching and rehearsals of the dancers, a little fairy group of young ladies rivaled the Opera House and Drury Lane in the correctness and spirit, the characteristic gestures and deportment of their performance. Clearly, much thought and preparation went into these productions, which combined individual instruction and creativity in dance. Given that dance was effectively part of the fabric of elite houses, events such as balls shaped how interior and exterior spaces were used. Houses displayed a chameleonic character, with some rooms adapted for purposes outside their normal function. This was especially the case if a dedicated ballroom was not incorporated into the building. Temporary structures could also be erected outside, forming additional limbs to the main structure. These alterations served practical purposes by providing enough space for guests and ensuring they had sufficient entertainment and refreshment. However, they also accommodated the impetus for display. Dance provided an opportunity to tempt the senses, not just through music and movement, but also via perfumed flowers, dazzling lights, luxurious decor, and collections of fine art. Such occasions were akin to stepping into a decorative chocolate box or display cabinet, in which the house was both an actor in and a stage for the performance. The centrality of the house in hosting a ball is illustrated through 2 letters dating from the late 18th and early 19th centuries, in which much attention is given to domestic arrangements and very little to actual dancing. Writing to her mother-in-law in 1791, Frances Banks described a ball held at Kingston Lacy after 6 years of refurbishments. Her concern for the minutiae of how the ball was conducted encompassed the appearance of the house as a whole. Guests arrived through the new entrance and were shown directly into the recently designed library. In Frances's bedroom, refreshments were available, and she contrived to place the most handsome bed in the apartment the most seen. The first guest who entered the ballroom described it as like the palace of Aladdin, and the entire level of the house was lit with candles and lamps, creating infinitely more show than if you spend the same sum in any other way. Frances was also exacting in her management of house staff, exhorting her poor servants to immediately begin cleaning after the ball finished, with breakfast at 8:30 the following morning. It is telling that Frances's only commentary on dance was that there were 36 couples, more gentlemen than ladies, and a band from Salisbury provided the music. Nearly 30 years later, Thomas Philip Robinson, the 3rd Baron Grantham, carefully articulated how he transformed Newby Hall for a ball. The exterior of the house was lit with coloured lamps to highlight the architectural detail, and a tent was constructed adjoining the middle window of the library to house a regimental band, which afforded an object of attraction at that end of the house after the dancing began at the other. There's a picture of the library there, which is an Adam library. Windows in the long vestibule were temporarily converted into conservatories and filled with what the newspapers would call choice exotics. Supper for a portion of the guests was held in the statue gallery, where the gold plate arranged over the large sarcophagus at the end looked very singular and striking, while the remainder dined in Lord Grantham's sitting room and the schoolroom. Like Frances Banks, his description of dancing was principally limited to observing that there were a great many quadrilles and some country dances. These testimonies reveal the importance that was placed on the house as an object in its own right during a ball, and the pride the authors took in sharing these details with their correspondents. In such documents, the fact that dancing occurred at all is almost insignificant. The performance of display was not limited to objects, but also included guests. For the coming of age of Viscount Milton, the recesses of the saloon at Wentworth House were fitted with raised couches from which guests could view, in the words of the Derby Mercury, the many graceful forms attired in the most splendid and tasteful manner, beaming with beauty and blazing with jewels. The gallery encircling the saloon resembled an elevated merry-go-round, holding 400 to 500 people at any one time who entered via one door, watched for half an hour, and then exited via another to allow more people to come through. An example of palpable voyeurism was detailed by Lord Grantham at Newby Hall, who erected a scaffold outside the dancing room windows to enable the ladies' maids to have a peep at their mistresses. Unfortunately, the scaffold was overcrowded, which resulted in the structure giving way, injuring the children's French maid and Lord Grantham's bailiff. Such stage managing on the part of the hosts clearly positioned balls as spectacles and shaped how and by whom they were viewed. Given the paucity of archival information about the actual performance of dance in the home, dance music in domestic collections can help to enrich our knowledge of repertoire and how it intersected with broader cultural narratives. From a pedagogical viewpoint, music for dance was instructive in learning rudiments such as phrase structure and fingering. A collection of French dances dating from 1770, located at Belton House, contains not only occasional fingerings, but also handwritten annotations of the number of bars needed for each dance figure and the repeats to be observed. I don't know how clearly you can see this. You can see scribbled across the top there instructions of what to do. And I didn't write down, the first strain once, the reprise once, the first strain once, and the second part to finish. So telling how many times you need to play each section. And on the bottom there, just to be played as 'tis wrote. As the bars per figure required would have been relatively common knowledge for anyone with a dance education, these annotations, coupled with childish inscriptions on the covers of the book, suggest that it was used for teaching. However, the publication also gives a further clue about domestic performance. Dedicated to Lady Bridgeman of Weston Park, who you also saw earlier with Janice's presentation, the collection was produced by Giovanni Gherardi, who described himself as having danced for the opera in Paris and London. Gherardi adroitly included two dances in remembrance of the dramatic petty piece of The Padlock, presented at your house under your conduct and direction, in which my deserving little pupils so agreeably surprised their honourable audience in the execution of the Allemands and in the dances I composed for them on the occasion. The Padlock was a highly successful afterpiece opera composed by Charles Dibdin in 1768, which was performed by the Bridgeman family at Weston Park on at least two further occasions in the mid-1770s. Gherardi's claim to choreography raises important questions about the influence of theatrical professionals in constructing dance in the home. Further interaction between musical pedagogy and theatrical works can be seen in the collection of Charlotte Edgerton of Tatton Park. In November 1833, Daniel Auber's opera Gustav III was produced at Covent Garden Theatre. The fifth act included a stunning ball scene, which incorporated a gallop comprising 40 or 50 couple ranging in all directions and in every possible figure, yet with the most perfect order and regularity. What made this scene more remarkable was its participatory nature. Numerous members of the aristocracy, including the Duchess of Kent and Princess Victoria, attended the opera, and many of them joined in the ball in masks. The following year, Charlotte learned a piano arrangement of the Galop, and it is one of the clearest examples of her educational progress in the collection. The music contains fingering throughout, while dates at the beginning and conclusion of the work detail the length of time taken to study the composition. Again, I don't know how clear it is. On the title page, you can see Charlotte's name. It's been cut off a little bit. The date of April the 21st, 1834. And in the bottom there, that's the very end of the piece. You've got the date, May the 3rd, 1834, and the initials of who we think was her governess. At the time, Charlotte was in London with her family, and just a week after she commenced learning the work, her father paid for a box at the opera. Although neither the theatre nor the opera was specified in his accounts, Gustav III was performed at Covent Garden that evening. While the publication that Charlotte owned was not explicitly designed to accompany dance, notwithstanding the music's original genesis, the Galop also appears at the conclusion of a set of quadrilles owned by Emma Chapman, which is part of the Stuart Simons collection here at Sydney Living Museums. The incorporation of theatrical elements into social dance was not unusual from a musical viewpoint. Quadrille music in the 1830s often drew upon operatic extracts, a practice that was not to everyone's taste. Sir Thomas Charles Morgan, who was husband of the novelist Sidney Morgan, bemoaned the use of Rossini's music for such a purpose, complaining, "Another auditory infliction which transcends all powers of description is the conversion of our best music into quadrille tunes. It is impossible to give the faintest idea of the torture which a genuine Rossinist endures from these mutilations of the happiest thought of the great composer." Despite Morgan's indignation, quadrille arrangements played an integral role in the dissemination of one of Rossini's most well-known operas, William Tell. Although it premiered in Paris in 1829, an English adaptation was not produced until the following year. Patrons in London who wished to hear the music were therefore reliant on concert performances of extracts, ballet productions that appropriated the opera score, or dance music arrangements. The role that publishers and quadrille bands played in this process cannot be underestimated. Goulding and Dalmain produced a musical Bijou just 2 months after the Parisian premiere of William Tell, which contained quadrilles arranged from the music. However, even prior to this, John Michael Vipert's band played his own quadrille adaptations at provincial balls, pushing beyond the metropolitan circuit. As such, renowned bands were also employed to play at country house entertainments. Domestic dance publications may in fact be representative not just of repertoire performed in London, but also in the home. Given the diverse narratives that weave around dance and its performance in domestic space, dance music brings with it the opportunity to both recreate the past and generate new works. Boughton House, which is owned by the current Duke of Buccleuch, is home to a significant collection comprising more than 450 volumes of music. While dance forms just a small part of the overall collection, its 18th century holdings include copies of important dance manuals, dance music from opera and theatrical works, and English and Scottish country dances and reels. The collection has inspired 2 performance events at the house to date, curated by Jennifer Thorpe and Paul Boucher. The calligraphy of dance focused on works that were known to the second Duke of Montagu, who was a patron of dance and theatre music. The performance comprised 3 dances accompanied by baroque flute and harpsichord, interspersed by commentary on connections between the dancers and the Montagu family. This was accompanied by a photographic exhibition produced by Tessa Traeger, who merged family portraits with choreographic notation. Handel at Boughton comprised an exhibition of Handel scores from the collection, in addition to items such as instruments for the royal fireworks and an orchestra of Chelsea porcelain musicians. So on the right there you have instruments on loan from the Bate Museum in Oxford to represent what was performed in music for the royal fireworks. Handel scores, what is thought to be harpsichord that Handel played on, and just out of the picture, a facsimile of a menu item showing what Mr. Handel ate for lunch when he visited Boughton. The performance comprised a pastiche opera ballet, interspersing recitatives and arias from Handel's operas, with a series of baroque dances set to his music, including 2 surviving choreographies from Giulio Cesare and Scipio. The performance concluded with a passacaglia by contemporary composer Luke Stiles, in which baroque musical idioms and dance were stretched and reimagined. The centrality of the house in these performances takes us through a full circle. In many ways, they were not dissimilar to the entertainments of the past, for dance was but one part of a larger equation. A tour of the house and gardens ensured that Boughton's collections and landscapes were on display to guests, and I can tell you that the Duke of Buccleuch was quite a march around the gardens. Dance took place in the main hall, surrounded by portraits and tapestries, while use of an unfinished section of the house for exhibition objects was an interesting appropriation of space. And the recreation of theatrical dance for a select audience was somewhat akin to the way in which the Harris and Ashley Cooper families pulled London productions into their homes. The way that it worked was that there was probably only 20 or 30 people in the main hall at Boughton. One group went on a tour around the house while the other group saw the performance, and then there was a swap over. In this particular case, dance manuals and music played a key role in bringing dance back into the house for modern audiences. Historic houses have myriad stories to tell, and dance, as a recurring part of genteel life, offers an avenue through which its influence on interior spaces and collections can be explored. The flexibility of dance to absorb and intersect with social and cultural ideals and relationships gives it meaning beyond mere figures, and as such presents a rich opportunity for developing interpretive possibilities in individual contexts. Thank you.